You're watching Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.
Hello, this is Dr. William E. Morgan, and this is Parker Clinical Rounds, where we explore clinical excellence with clinicians from the field. Today I have a very special guest, Dr. Heather Berlin, neuroscientist and Master of Public Health as well.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice.
Oh, thanks for having me. So I spent the whole first part of my career doing clinical research, trying to understand, well, first of all, how the physical brain creates conscious perception, and then having more practical applications. What is the neural basis of impulsive and compulsive disorders, and how to come up with more novel treatments based on what we understand about the brain. And then I actually moved into doing clinical practice, where I now integrate the research with my practice, and I treat patients using psychotherapy and talk therapy, but with a deep understanding of what's happening at the brain level.
So we talked a lot about the prefrontal cortex and its ability to kind of dampen the effects of the limbic system. Can you explain a little bit of what is the prefrontal cortex, what does it do, and how does it inhibit, or how can we enhance its ability to inhibit impulsive or compulsive reactions?
So if you think of the limbic system as our evolutionarily older part of the brain, like our reptilian brain, but it's sort of the accelerator of the brain. It pushes us for our immediate wants and needs and avoidance of pain or danger. It's very reactive. The prefrontal cortex, which evolved more recently in our evolutionary history, is kind of like the brake system of the brain. And when these two systems are in balance, we can kind of behave pretty adaptively. But if the accelerator is on overdrive, it can override the brake system. So the limbic system can override the prefrontal cortex. Or if the brake system is damaged or underactive, it's not going to do its job to help people inhibit. So then you either have to use medication, certain types of medication. For example, for ADHD, it seems counterintuitive to give somebody a stimulant who's already hyperactive, but you're actually stimulating neurons in the prefrontal cortex. You're turning on the brake system to allow them to control their behavior and their attention. But we also can use non-medication based techniques, things like meditation, things like stopping before just instinctively responding and taking a few breaths and allowing some time for the prefrontal cortex to turn on, because the limbic system acts very quickly. The prefrontal cortex has a little bit of a lag time. And it works well for like when you have to respond quickly, like to danger. You want the limbic system to go right into gear before you're consciously aware of anything. But if you have some time to make a better decision, give yourself that time.
I like the example you used, that you might be in a theater and be scared by the scene you see, but you stop yourself before you run out of the theater.
Exactly.
So one's the limbic initial response, but then the prefrontal cortex will, okay, this is not a real danger. We're going to go ahead and sit here and watch the rest of the movie.
Yeah, what happens is you have that instinctive, because if there is a real danger, you want to act quickly. If someone cuts you off, you slam on the brakes before you're even consciously aware of what's happened. But that happens in the theater. You have this instinctive thing. Then the prefrontal cortex kind of looks around in the environment and says, wait a second. Oh yeah, I'm in a movie theater. This isn't real. This is a simulation. I don't need to actually run away. This killer isn't actually coming after me. And that's adaptive. But if somebody has a prefrontal cortex lesion, sometimes they're making these really poor decisions because they're not taking into account the context of the situation.
So to help us, like this show is for clinicians, what can we do to help our patients, the ones who maybe have control issues? You talked earlier about the fatigability of willpower, that you have more willpower earlier in the day, and as you go on, you have less willpower. So how can we set up our patients' lives so that they're less likely to fall victim to either addictive behaviors or compulsions?
I think, realizing just how, in some cases, how much your brain is controlling you in a way, and so making sure it's well taken care of, making sure to eat healthy, to get enough sleep. Sleep is hugely important, exercise. And so I often think of it like a physical, if you don't work out, if you don't keep up with your body, its natural inclination is to kind of decline, right? It's not just going to maintain the homeostasis. I guess when you're a kid and you have a really great metabolism, but in general, as an adult, you have to keep maintaining it, right? And it's the same thing with the brain. So even if you don't have a very clear psychiatric issue or whatever that you think you need help, you still have to maintain brain health, or else you can end up going, to these places of addiction, or all of your worst kind of predilections will come to the surface.
So sleep helps us, maybe taking naps. If you realize late in the day, I'm more easily to succumb to this temptation, maybe I'd better take a nap.
Yes, and it's not just even temptations, it's being irritable, maybe irritable to your partner, right? Making bad decisions, making quick decisions, sending off an email that you're going to later regret, right? So yes, even a 15-minute nap can refresh the brain.
That's very pragmatic. So is willpower like a muscle, that the more you exercise it, the stronger it is?
In some ways, yes. I mean, we all also have genetic differences, right? And the way also our brains have been wired up. So I like to think of it like our genes create the boundaries or the range in which we can be in, but then our behaviors can get us either to the top of that range or to the bottom within the genetic constraints of the range that you have. So yes, with practice, you can get better and stronger, but if you're somebody who just naturally has, not great prefrontal cortex function, you might never be the most controlled person, but you can certainly improve, from where you're at now.
So I had a patient when I was in clinical practice in the hospital, came back, war injury, prefrontal cortex injury, high cognitive ability, but if he thought you were crossed his line, he would be duking it out with them. I mean, it just snapped. He could go. He was combatant. Everything was there except for the ability to shut her down.
Yes. And that's the interesting thing about it, is that if you have prefrontal cortex damage, a lot of times everything else will seem the same, the personality, the intelligence, but this one thing is affected, the ability to, let's say, regulate emotion or regulate outbursts. And it becomes clear when there's a trigger or when they're provoked. Other people can say, oh, you know what, this isn't the right situation to act out or start a fight. But when your filter system is just turned off, the brake is turned off, you're going to explode.
So people are promoting various supplements, essential oils, or things to promote dopamine production. What do you have to say about those?
So I have to say, I'm not an expert in this area of supplements. I think that there are things that people say work for them, and if they do work, great. I just always am like, I want to see the scientific, what's happening at the mechanistic level. But I do know that basic eating healthy, having healthy fats are good for the brain. There's myelination that basically is this white coating that coats the axons of the neurons. So nuts, avocado, good healthy fish oils can really help the brain.
So I've heard it said, like carbohydrates and proteins, we consume those, but fats become us. The fats we eat become who we are. So if you're having bad fats, it's going to affect your brain health. Is that so?
Yes, I definitely believe that. And I also think, and this is maybe less scientific, but I think there is science around it. The way that if you eat animal meat, the way the animals are killed, if they're releasing a lot of cortisol just before they die, that gets into the meat, that can get into your body, and that these are things that can be considered.
And I've heard that, but I've not seen the research on that. It's like, an animal that's stressed, of course, the last moments are going to be pretty stressed.
Yeah.
I've heard hunters, because you have a cow in a feeding pen. Every day is a bad day for that cow. They're not living, they're out in the fields. A hunter will go out, and that elk will only have one bad day.
Right.
And they didn't even know it's coming.
It's not chronic stress.
Yes, it's not chronic stress.
Well, I mean, it's also the difference between, farm-raised salmon and wild salmon, right? I mean, you end up seeing it on your plate, but it looks different. It has higher nutrients. It's so the way it lives, the way the animal lives affects what its muscles and its body is made up. And then that eventually you ingest it. And then that goes to your brain. It's a food chain, and we're in it. And so I think being conscientious about what you're putting into your body. And again, like I said, sleep, very important. But, and so supplements, I think if you are not getting what you need from what you're eating and what you're taking in, let's say vitamin D from the sun, and you have a deficit, then I think supplements can really make a difference. If you have what you need, I don't know if overloading on vitamin C, for example, makes a big difference or not. Yeah.
Well, so I ran into a scientist once, a neuroscientist. Only supplement he takes is choline. I'm like, you know what?
Well, that's for memory.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is the thing. It couldn't hurt. And I don't know the research well enough to be able to say anything definitively on it, but I'll take whatever, is proven in a double-blind placebo-controlled trial to work and have an effect, as long as there's not significant side effects. I think my brain, is my greatest asset, and so I want to keep it as healthy as possible.
You've gone from clinical research, or from bench science research to a clinician. I think you would agree that it all comes down to the N of one.
Yes.
If it works for that patient, it worked.
Yeah. And I even say things like for the placebo effect, like let's use the placebo effect for our advantage. Like, why do people think it's a dirty word? Like, if it works and it helps people, why not? I mean, there's the nocebo effect where, like, if people tell someone this isn't going to work for you, it'll have a less likely chance of working. So, there's things working against the person. Why not, like, bolster the things that are in favor of treatments and being healthy?
I find it interesting one study where they told one of the doctors that you actually have the active ingredient in your pill. What was it? It was a placebo.
Yeah.
And the other person would say, well, you have 50% chance it's the placebo. The person who gave the placebo that he thought was the active ingredient had better responses, even though he was told not to tell the patients.
Right.
So some communication took place between them because he believed it was more powerful.
Right.
And then there's also the concept that if you give a placebo and it's like, okay, you just give it, there's no side effects, you'll have a pretty flat effect, but okay, this is the pill, but it may cause vomiting, diarrhea, and crisscross eyes and buck teeth. They take it, they'll have a greater response. So it gives that power to it. So
yes, yeah. I mean, that's why also, I have a lot of patients who are like, even with COVID, for example, COVID can cause a multitude of different symptoms. And somebody might have only a couple of those symptoms, but then you start reading about all the things that it can cause, and suddenly it's like, oh wait, I feel like I might have this or I might have that. The more knowledge you have, it can influence you in both a positive and a negative way.
So here's something that's pragmatic to our audience, is that if I take an x-ray of someone and show them it, they're more likely to have a negative outcome. And if I take an MRI and it affect their outcome, and if I show it to them, it's even worse. My thought is they start looking at themselves as being frail because you find something wrong in all of these. If I put it in context, like, oh, this is a degenerative disc, but this is normal. We see these all the time. They don't cause pain. Can we mitigate the effects of imagery like that with our words?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, pain itself can be modified and modulated, but with thoughts. And, words are thoughts, right? And so you can influence whether two people might have the same physical, issue. And one is in a lot of pain and the other is maybe in mild or moderate pain. And a lot of that is psychological, So as much as you can, sort of help the person with their perception of pain, if you say, you should be in a lot of pain because of this, then maybe you will be, right? But you say, it might be mild pain, but it should be fine with a couple of Tylenol. It can have an effect.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And you've been listening to Dr. Heather Berlin.
Thanks for watching another episode of Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.